Senator Mike Lee from Utah is a strong ally of the president, but he's been pushing legislation to limit emergency powers of the presidency.
Now, suddenly, while we here in Britain were sleeping, President Trump's world-changing grand plan to tear up the rules of the global economy came unstuck. The plan was to hammer importers with crippling trade tariffs, import taxes, though the president doesn't call them that, drive consumers to buy homegrown stuff, force companies to make stuff in the USA and employ more Americans. And since only Congress and not the president can levy tariffs, well, just say that free trade has been so unfair to America that it's a national emergency. And then President Trump can do what he likes. That was the plan. What could possibly go wrong? Well, everything could go wrong, and a few hours ago everything did. The US Court of International Trade ruled that the Constitution and the law mean what they say when they decree the president can't actually do what he likes. The Congress is there for a reason, and anyway, a trade deficit with this or that country, and somewhere there's no trade deficit at all, like Britain, doesn't actually amount to a national emergency. So the judges ruled cancel the US trade tariffs on which Trump has based most of his economic strategy. And by the way, crippling import taxes also whack up prices for American consumers and businesses, though President Trump denies that. But whoever said his plan to tear up the global economy and put it back together in the way that he likes made sense. Apart from President Trump and his loyal team, I mean. So now what? Well, maybe find other ways, obscure ancient pieces of law to justify the tariff war. But what would the judges make of that? And will Congress step up? And what do countries, including the EU, do now? They're looking for a trade deal to soften the blow of the tariffs that the court has now judged illegal. And what about us, Britain? We just reached a trade agreement with America, and Keir Starmer had a rare happy day boasting about it. What will happen to that deal? Well, the short answer is no one knows. And uncertainty is never good for business. Not in America, not here, not anywhere. And the fuller, useful answer is, well, it's what we'll try to find out on today's show. Firstly, let me welcome to the programme Gregg Nunziata, who's Executive Director of the Society for the Rule of Law. Gregg, welcome to you.
Thank you for having me, Don.
Thank you for joining us, Gregg. The Court of International Trade ruling landed, didn't it, like a bit of a bombshell, and it's reverberated around the world. But can it be called a total surprise? I mean, the use of historic emergency powers to hand out trade tariffs by the president, that always seemed a dubious way of going about things.
It always did seem dubious, and there's lots of levels on which it was dubious legally. We in this country have over the last century granted more and more emergency powers to the president. But even before Trump came around, there's been a turn away from this. The federal judiciary is asking Congress really to do more of the policy setting, to do its job, to not delegate to the president, to not let the president make significant policy decisions. But particularly here, we're talking about trade, which is, as you mentioned, tariffs are given, the authority to set tariffs are given to Congress by the Constitution. There is this statute called IEPA, which is an Emergency Powers Act for the president. That's the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which grows out of something that was called the Trading with the Enemies Act in World War I.
Yeah.
And it's really meant to allow the president to regulate transactions in a clear national emergency, such as a war or conflict, transactions that implicate American national security. Clearly, the president was trying to bootstrap economic policymaking onto this idea of national emergencies, which was, I think, was likely a bridge too far for even otherwise sympathetic judges.
Yeah, I mean, calling trade deficits a national emergency. I mean, in the case of Britain, there's not even a deficit, and the role of Congress, that's very well understood. Now, the judge's ruling, it was very unequivocal, wasn't it? Do you imagine that other pieces of law that might be unearthed by the president's lawyers, would they be any more convincing to the court?
No, I think this is, I assume, we haven't heard really the reaction yet, but they will try to appeal and defend this, but I think they're going to face tough sledding in any federal court they take this to. I mean, this is just it is a stretch of the statute. This court considered both the global tariffs, which are clearly not connected to any understandable national emergency. It also considered more limited tariffs against our neighbors, Mexico and Canada, that were based on a supposed national emergency concerning fentanyl. And they found that unconvincing too, that the administration didn't comply with the requirements of the statute by connecting these tariffs to an actual emergency
Right.
if
But,
fentanyl constitutes one. But
no,
clearly, the global tariffs are way, way afield.
right. Now, the tariffs on steel and aluminium and on cars, they are not covered by this emergency power that the court has refused to accept. They're still in force. Couldn't that just be widened to everything else?
Yeah, I think we are going to see challenges across the board on almost all of these presidential tariffs, and I think the Supreme Court has been looking for opportunities to put limits on presidential discretion and to
Oh,
demand that Congress make policy. And I think any of these tariffs are a good vehicle for the court to look at it. So you'll see challenges both on whether these tariffs are justified by the statutes and whether those statutes themselves, the underlying emergency statutes, are constitutional to begin with. This decision yesterday said that under the terms of that statute, giving the president emergency power, the tariffs can't stand. But you will also see, and you are seeing, challenges to the statute itself, saying
yeah,
that the Congress can't give the president any kind of discretion to set tariffs and national emergencies.
yeah.
So we have a long way to go in this litigation, but I think the administration is going to see more losses.
Right. Really interesting, Greg, to hear you say that the Supreme Court is waiting, as it were, to demonstrate the constraints, the limitations of presidential power. What about Congress? It is their job to set tariffs. Might they take up the slack and just take over the job?
It would be nice to see that. We have seen Congress of both parties giving away powers to the presidency because it's easier, frankly, to not have to do the tough work of legislating and to not have to cast votes that might be controversial. But there's been a bit of a move against that, including from some of the president's closest allies. Senator Mike Lee from Utah is a strong ally of the president, but he's been pushing legislation to limit emergency powers of the presidency. So I think there's interest in that, and there's bipartisan interest in that. It's been a couple of generations of power moving away from Congress, so it would be it is turning a steamship to have Congress recover its authority, but
Yeah.
there are inklings there. So I'm hopeful there'll be more work there.
And would Congress be willing to do that? Because it would be a more laborious process, and there would be arguments, I suppose, on both sides and on both sides of the aisle.
Sure. I mean, tariffs are, we're in the midst of something of a political realignment here. Tariffs used to be favored by the Democrats and opposed by Republicans, and now more Republicans, since Trump came to power, are sympathetic to tariffs, and more Democrats are opposed to them. So it's not even a clear partisan divide on tariffs. It would be a messy debate in Congress, but that's what a legislature is meant to do, to have messy debates and to set national policy.
Right. Looks like quite a job for the president to turn this round, if it's possible to turn this round.